My twin brother stole my identity and took my place at the university I had always dreamed of. My name is Lucas Grayson, and my own brother wore my face to live the life I worked my entire childhood to build. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story, because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. We were born 2 minutes apart, Damon and me. 2 minutes, that was it. But those 2 minutes somehow shaped everything. He was always slightly ahead, louder, flashier, more daring. I was the quieter one, the observer, the planner, the one who studied late into the night while Damon coasted on charm and luck. It was never supposed to be a competition, but twins. We live under constant comparison. Same face, different outcomes. And somewhere along the way, Damon decided he liked what I had more than what he could build on his own. The dream was always Colburn University. Since I was 12, their literature program was elite competitive, filled with professors I'd followed obsessively. I'd saved screenshots of their lectures, written mock essays for scholarships years before I was eligible. I wanted it so badly it felt like part of my DNA. So when I submitted my application, early admission, perfect GPA recommendation letters from 2 of the best teachers at my high school, I felt certain. Maybe not confident, but grounded. I had done everything right. Then, silence. No email, no letter, just a black hole where my future was supposed to be. At first I blamed the postal system, then myself. Maybe I typed my address wrong. Maybe I missed something. My heart was pounding every time I opened the mailbox, every time I refreshed my inbox. One morning, I heard Damon in the kitchen. He was on the phone talking in that syrupy voice he only used when he was lying. No, yeah, of course, Colburn's incredible. I'm honored. Yeah, literature department. Full ride. I froze. He was grinning at Mom as he poured cereal, one hand covering the phone. It's Professor Ashby, he mouthed. Professor Ashby, Colburn's department head. The woman who wrote the very book that made me want to study there in the first place. A cold spike ran down my back. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold in my house. My dream, my call, my professor's name, and it was coming out of Damon's mouth. He ended the call, high-fived our mom, like it was some casual win, and caught me standing at the doorway. You good, bro? He asked, like I was the one acting weird. I wanted to scream, but something told me to wait, watch, make sure I wasn't crazy. That night, while he was out, I searched his room. I wasn't proud of it, but I wasn't ashamed either. I found the Colburn acceptance letter tucked inside his drawer, except it had my name at the top, Lucas Grayson, not his. He had applied as me. He had stolen my identity, rewritten my future with a pen and a forged transcript. And my mother, she knew. She had signed the FAFSA forms. She had helped him. My hands were shaking. My knees buckled. I sat on the edge of Damon's bed, holding that letter like it might catch fire in my hands. This wasn't just theft. It was betrayal by blood. I remember the sound of the front door opening. He came in humming some stupid song. I barely had time to put the letter back. I confronted Mom first. What happened to my Colburn letter? I asked, holding eye contact, forcing my voice to stay level. She blinked at me. Lucas, I thought you decided not to apply. You were so anxious. Damon said you backed out. My heart dropped. The lie was practiced, polished. You helped him apply as me. Don't be ridiculous, she said, brushing it off, but her fingers trembled on the edge of the counter. That was the moment something shattered in me. I realized I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. Damon had stolen more than just my future. He had stolen my mother's trust, my identity, my name. He was now me at the school I had built my whole youth around, and I was just a shadow left behind. In the weeks that followed, I didn't know who I was anymore. I withdrew from friends. I quit the college counseling meetings. I stopped talking about literature because every time I did, I'd think of Colburn and the twins sitting in my seat. No one else knew, not yet. I didn't tell my friends or my teachers. I couldn't stomach the shame. Instead, I got a part-time job at a small used bookstore in town. It paid barely anything but the quiet, the paper smell, the simplicity of it. It helped me stay afloat. Every day, I stared at the new student arrivals posts from Colburn on social media. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of Damon smiling, surrounded by new friends, tagging himself in clubs I'd researched for months. He was living my life, and I was just surviving. But I wasn't done. Somewhere deep inside me, I made a silent vow. If Damon thought he could steal my identity and get away with it, he had underestimated the wrong brother. The mind does strange things when it's pushed into a corner. Some people collapse under betrayal. Others get loud, angry, destructive. But me, I got quiet, focused. The more I let it sit, the fact that my own twin stole my name, my academic record, my future, the more I realized something cold and undeniable. He had planned this. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't desperate, it was calculated. I started replaying the months leading up to the application deadline. Damon had asked oddly specific questions about my essay, pretending to be supportive. "What story did you pick for the personal statement?" he'd said casually one night as we sat on the porch. "Something about your childhood. That always lands well." I had told him. Like an idiot, I had told him about the night Dad left, how I found comfort in books, how writing became my way of coping. He nodded, said it was deep, powerful. He had used that. He used my pain to write an essay as me. I thought about telling someone, maybe our high school counselor, maybe even the Colburn administration, but I had no real proof yet. The acceptance letter I found, it had my name on it. There was no trace of Damon's actual signature anywhere. He was smart like that, or maybe just shameless. Mom's denial still rang in my ears. Damon said you backed out. Like that wasn't something she could have confirmed with me. Like I hadn't spent 2 years obsessing over that school. It wasn't just Damon's betrayal. It was her silence, her complicity. I had to find out more. That night, I logged into my school's student portal. My own account had been marked as incomplete, no SAT scores submitted, no transcript upload, no recommendation letters. All gone. I remembered giving those documents to Mom to scan and submit. She had looked me in the eye and said, "Done, sent it, you're ahead of the game." Had she lied? Or had Damon deleted my submission after stealing the files? I dug through our shared family computer. At first there was nothing, but then I checked the recycle bin. There they were. PDFs of my transcript, my recommendation letters, deleted weeks before the deadline. My heart was pounding. I knew what I was looking at. Damon had used my documents to create a fake application under my name, but only he had submitted it. I never had a shot. He had burned the bridge after crossing it. And my mother, maybe she turned a blind eye. Maybe she helped. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I printed everything I could, timestamps, deleted documents, screenshots of Colburn student portal. Then I locked it all in a folder I named LG versus DG. I wasn't going to make a move yet, not until I had more. At the bookstore, I tried to act normal. The owner, Miss Caraway, was a gentle woman in her 60s who treated her store like a temple. She noticed something was off with me right away. "You're folding the paperbacks like they're angry at you," she said, raising an eyebrow. I laughed weakly. "Sorry, just tired." She paused, then said something that stuck with me. "Be careful, Lucas. When you bottle things too tightly, they tend to explode in ways you can't control." It wasn't advice exactly, but it felt like someone finally saw through me. That afternoon, I found Damon's Instagram. He had changed his handle to Lucas.GG Academia. My name, my dream aesthetic, book quotes, campus pictures, shots with classmates I'd imagined having. He had taken everything. My identity wasn't just stolen, it was rewritten. What really broke me was a post from the literature building. A picture of Damon holding a cup of coffee with the caption, "Grateful to be here. Shout out to the people who believed in me. Artie Colburn lit. Ira Lucas Grayson." I wanted to punch the screen, but instead I messaged him. "Meh, you're not going to get away with this." Damon 1 minute later, "Chill. You should be thanking me. You never would have survived there." "Meh, you stole my life." "Damon, I became you. You should be flattered." There it was. No remorse, just arrogance, pride. I screenshotted everything. That night, I emailed myself a backup of every piece of evidence I had, just in case something happened to my computer. I also created a draft email addressed to Colburn's admissions office. I didn't send it, not yet, but it was there waiting. I started visiting Colburn's website like it was a crime scene. I memorized the campus map. I studied the faculty list. I wanted to know exactly what Damon was walking through every day so I could eventually walk in with the truth. But the anger wasn't enough. I needed a plan, so I made one. Over the next week, I began calling Colburn anonymously, asking general questions, posing as a curious student who just wanted to understand how ID verification worked. I learned that first-year students had to submit ID upon arrival, but Damon had already beaten that system, probably using a fake license, or maybe even bribing someone. Who knew? The problem was, unless I went there in person, I couldn't prove anything. And if I did, Damon could flip it all on me. He could say I was jealous, obsessive, mentally unstable. He had the advantage. But what he didn't know, I was watching him, studying him, and I was going to find the crack in his perfect performance. Because there's one thing even a brilliant liar can't fake forever. Being me. I used to think identity was something you were born with: your name, your face, the stories you carried. But when someone else takes those things and starts living as you begin to question everything. Damon was now Lucas, on paper, online, in lecture halls. He was answering to my name, smiling for professors I had once dreamed of meeting, using my childhood pain to impress them. And I was invisible. The worst part, no one saw the theft. There was no crime scene, no police report, no fingerprints, just me quietly watching my life unfold from the outside. But invisibility has its advantages. I could move without being noticed. I could study him the way a hunter watches prey. On a rainy Thursday, I decided to test how far he had gone. I took the day off from the bookstore and took the long train ride to Colburn. It was surreal stepping onto that campus for the first time, not as a student, but as a ghost haunting the life I was supposed to have. I walked past the literature building, heart pounding. That place had lived in my dreams for years. Now it felt like a locked gate behind which someone else wore my skin. I didn't go in, not yet. Instead, I sat at the campus cafe, half hidden behind a pair of sunglasses and a hoodie, and I waited. And sure enough, around 1:15 p.m. I saw him. Damon, laughing, surrounded by a group of students, books in hand, wearing my gray sweatshirt, the one with the Colburn crest that I had bought months ago in hope before any of this happened. He looked so comfortable, so believable. I followed at a distance as he made his way into Ashby Hall. Literature 101. I knew the schedule by heart. What got to me most wasn't just seeing him there, it was the way he performed. He greeted professors by name, nodded thoughtfully during conversations, quoted authors I introduced him to years ago. He had taken my mind too. After the lecture ended, I watched from a distance as he stood talking to a woman I immediately recognized, Professor Ashby. He was charming her. She was laughing at something he said. I didn't know what it was, but it made me want to scream. Then in a flash of boldness, or maybe recklessness, I walked up to them. I didn't think, I just acted. Professor Ashby. She turned a little startled. Yes, I looked at Damon. He froze. I just wanted to meet you, I said, offering my hand. I've admired your work for years. She smiled, polite but confused. Thank you. Are you a student here? Damon stepped forward. He's just my brother, visiting. His voice was tight, forced. Lucas, I said directly to her, staring at Damon. She blinked. You're Lucas. Damon let out a forced chuckle. No, I'm Lucas. He's Damon. He's just messing around. I watched her face. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? He was already in. He had already set the stage, built the character, rehearsed the lines. I was the one with no script. I left before things could get worse. I didn't want a scene, not yet. I needed more. That night, I sat alone at a cafe near campus and thought about what I'd just done. My hands were still shaking. He had lied so smoothly, even I almost believed him. And Ashby. She didn't question it. Why would people believe what's already familiar to them? He had spent weeks shaping their version of me, but there was something in his face when he saw me. Not fear, not guilt, annoyance, like I was the one interrupting his story. I couldn't let it go on. I went back home and dug into everything. I pulled up the plagiarism software we used at school and entered a few keywords from the essay I had written my story about Dad, about literature saving me. Then I searched Colburn's student essay forums. I knew some departments published anonymous excerpts for writing workshops, and there it was. A paragraph, almost word for word, my writing, signed LG. My chest burned. I printed it, added it to the folder. At the bookstore, I stayed late one night to organize shelves. Miss Carraway noticed. You're working too hard, she said. You have that look. What look? The look people get when they're trying to carry an entire building on their back. I hesitated, then said quietly, What would you do if someone stole your story? She raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean your actual story, who you are. And they wore it like a costume. She looked at me for a long time. Then I'd take it back, she said, piece by piece, loudly if I had to. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I began crafting a letter, not an email, a printed sealed letter addressed to Colburn's internal review board. Inside, I included copies of my original documents, screenshots of the deleted files, the plagiarized essay, a written statement, and finally a challenge DNA verification. A twin might look like me, but he wasn't me. I didn't send it yet, but I was close. I just needed one final move, one moment where I could shatter the illusion Damon had created. If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from lack of sound, it comes from being dismissed, forgotten. That's the silence I grew up with. Damon and I were identical in appearance, but the way our parents treated us made it feel like we were from different planets. Damon was the gifted one, the charming one, the one they called our golden boy. Me, I was the backup plan. I didn't realize how deeply those roots went until the betrayal with Colburn. But looking back now, the signs were always there. Like when we were 10 and Damon stole cash from Dad's wallet. I took the blame because I didn't want him to get grounded, and my mom. She just looked at me and said, "That's what good brothers do. They protect each other." Or when we were 15 and Damon failed his math midterm. Dad threatened to cut off his video games, but I stayed up night after night tutoring him until I was too tired to study for my own finals. I scraped by with a B- that semester. Damon, he passed with my help and was rewarded with a new phone. I kept telling myself it was fine, that Damon needed more support, that it was noble to be the quiet, reliable one. But deep down I was growing resentful, not of Damon at first, but of how easily our parents bought his performance. He'd mess up lie charm his way out and they'd still look at him like he was the sun. Me, I could do everything right and still be invisible. It wasn't until junior year that I realized Damon had begun copying more than just my homework. He was copying me, my mannerisms, the books I loved, the college lists I made. I chalked it up to sibling influence. Twins mirror each other, right? But this was more than mirroring. This was rehearsal. He had been learning how to become me, piece by piece. And my parents, they made it easy. When I brought up my dream to apply to Colburn, they smiled and nodded. When Damon said the same thing 2 weeks later, Mom pulled out a college prep binder and Dad offered to write his essay draft. I should have seen it then, but I was still hoping to earn their validation the honest way. Through results, through discipline, and Damon, he was already halfway through his performance. One evening, shortly before the application deadline, I had asked Mom to review my essay. She barely skimmed it, said it was too emotional. Damon read it behind my back, rewrote a version, and apparently made it his own. He used my story, the one I had bled onto paper. He stole my pain, packaged it, and my mother helped mail it. That realization crushed me. After I confronted her about the missing documents, she stopped looking me in the eye. Meals were tense, conversations shallow. Dad barely noticed he was always working late or watching TV with his headphones in. But Mom, she knew. In her silence said everything. One night, I heard her talking to Damon behind closed doors, whispering. I stood in the hallway, breath shallow. "You have to be careful now," she said. "I've got it under control," he replied. "He won't do anything. He's not like you, Damon. He's patient. That's worse." That was the first time I realized my mother feared me. Not because I was violent, but because I was still. Because I wasn't lashing out. Because I was thinking. I started wondering how far she had gone to protect Damon. Did she intercept my application emails? Did she delete correspondence from Colburn? Had she wanted him to succeed at my expense? And the question that haunted me most, did she ever believe I was the better son? I didn't want to answer it, because deep down I already knew. I remembered when Damon crashed my bike as a kid. He had borrowed it without asking, snapped the front wheel and scraped up the frame. When I told our parents, they said he didn't mean to. Don't be dramatic. That became a pattern. Damon didn't mean to do anything. He was never responsible for the damage he left behind. But I was always expected to forgive, always expected to understand. Now he had wrecked something bigger than a bike. He had wrecked my future, and I wasn't going to be the understanding brother anymore. I wanted them to see what it felt like to be invisible, to be replaced. So I printed out copies of Damon's fake student profile, the one that listed his birth date as mine, the essay he submitted the login records under my student ID. I left them on the kitchen table one morning before heading out. When I came back later that night, the papers were gone. No one said a word. No one even looked at me. But I heard her crying in the bathroom. Good. I wanted the truth to sting. Because for once in my life, I wasn't going to be the brother who swallowed it all. I was going to fight. The next step. Go back to Colburn. Not to confront Damon again. Not yet. But to step into his life. To see how deep the lie had gone. To understand exactly how he had become me. So I could unravel it piece by piece. They say the truth will set you free. but no one ever mentions how much it shatters you first. By now, I had my folder, a growing pile of screenshots, printed emails, timestamps, comparisons, but all of it was circumstantial, a tangled knot of data that made sense to me, but not yet to anyone else. I needed more, something undeniable, something that would hit like a hammer. So, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I emailed my old English teacher, Ms. Rowan. She was one of the few adults in my life who'd ever believed in my writing, who told me back in sophomore year that I had a voice worth listening to. I didn't tell her everything in the email, just that I was working on a situation involving academic identity theft and needed a copy of her original recommendation letter. I told her I had misplaced mine. She responded within hours. "Of course, Lucas, here's the version I sent with your Colburn application. I was honored to write it for you." I opened the file. My eyes scanned the letter. It was glowing, genuinely moving. She believed in me. But when I checked the submission timestamps on the Common App portal I'd hacked back into, there was no sign her letter was ever sent with my application, which meant only one thing. Damon had taken it, copied it, uploaded it for himself, probably with a throwaway email and a temporary password, probably with help from Mom who had access to our school accounts. I stared at the two documents, her glowing praise of me now falsely attached to him. It made my skin crawl, but it was also exactly what I needed, because now I could prove that he had claimed recommendations that explicitly mentioned things only I had done, like publishing a short story in the local paper or winning the regional essay contest, achievements that belonged to me. I printed both versions, highlighted the details, added it to my growing arsenal, and I started to see the full map of his betrayal. There was no way Damon had pulled this off alone. He didn't know how to manage portals, deadlines, essays. That had always been my strength, which led me to one awful conclusion: Mom helped more than I thought. I started checking the IP logs on our shared computer. I had learned how to do this through a tech blog tracing access records for college application sites. Sure enough, on the same day Damon's application was submitted, the IP address linked to our home showed multiple logins, one under my name, one under a throwaway account, same IP, same browser, different IDs. The same day my files were deleted from the portal. I even found a temporary Gmail account, lucasgrayson.alt. Damon had created it as a dummy address. He used it to reroute the acceptance email so I'd never see it. And he did all of it under my roof. The trail was finally taking shape. But evidence wasn't enough. If I wanted to confront this properly, I needed to look him in the eyes, not just as a brother, but as a fraud. So I went back to Colburn, this time with a plan. I dressed clean, button-down shirt, my actual ID in my pocket, and I walked straight into the literature building like I belonged there, because in a way I did. I found the student bulletin board and waited until I saw his name, my name, Lucas Grayson, listed on the sign-up sheet for a student poetry reading that Friday. Perfect. That meant he'd be performing, publicly, on campus, in front of students and faculty, including Professor Ashby, and I'd be in the audience, watching, documenting, waiting for my moment. Over the next 2 days, I did my homework. I dug into university policy, found the ethics code on student impersonation, found the academic penalty clauses, cross-referenced the language they used: intent to deceive, misuse of personal data, plagiarized identity. And then I wrote a new letter, this one addressed directly to Colburn's ethics committee. I didn't just explain what Damon had done. I documented it step by step: dates, logins, names, recommendations, screenshots, cross-matched timestamps. And at the very end, I added one final note. If you require DNA testing, I'm willing. I'm not afraid of what the truth will show. All I had to do was wait for Friday. I told myself not to expect a scene, but deep down I hoped for one, because a small part of me wanted Damon to see what it felt like, to have something ripped from him the way he ripped Colburn from me. Friday came fast. I arrived at the lecture hall early, tucked myself into the middle of the crowd, hoodie on, eyes sharp. Then I watched him walk up to the stage, confident, polished, wearing my cadence, holding my dreams in his hands. And then he read a poem about brothers, about shadows, about guilt. It was subtle, but I heard it. Was it a confession or just another performance? I couldn't tell. But as the applause rose and he smiled like the world belonged to him, I stood up, pulled out my phone and took a picture. Then I walked out, and as I left, I dropped the envelope with all the evidence on the front desk of the campus registrar. No return address, just a note. One of your students is lying about who he is. When I walked out of the lecture hall that day, I wasn't expecting fireworks. I wasn't waiting for an announcement or a dramatic chase down the hallway. I knew how institutions worked, slow, careful, buried in process, but still something shifted in me. I had finally acted, not impulsively, not emotionally, but strategically. The folder was delivered, the evidence was irrefutable. I had spoken in the only language people like Damon and my mother respected: receipts. Now it was out of my hands. I went back to the bookstore that weekend, my stomach a knot of fire. Miss Carraway noticed it instantly. "You look like someone waiting for the sky to fall." I didn't answer. I didn't have words for the mix of hope and rage curling inside me. I kept refreshing my burner email, the one I had listed in the letter to Colburn's ethics committee. Nothing, until Sunday night. At 11:42 p.m. I got a reply. "We acknowledge receipt of your submission. An internal review has been initiated. Please be available should follow-up be necessary." I read it 5 times, each word sharper than the last. It wasn't confirmation, but it was motion. A day passed, then 2. Then on Wednesday, I got a text from Damon. "Damon, what the hell did you do?" Just 6 words, but enough to make my hands tremble. I didn't answer. I waited. By Friday it hit. A formal request from Colburn's Office of Academic Integrity. They wanted to speak with me in person, verify my identity, cross-reference my claims. They asked me to bring original documentation and, if possible, submit a voluntary DNA test for conclusive comparison. I said yes without hesitation. They scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday. But before that day arrived, Damon showed up at the bookstore, unannounced, wearing a baseball cap hoodie pulled up like he was trying to vanish. But I knew that walk. I knew that tension in his jaw. I knew my own face when it was cornered. Miss Carraway was out back doing inventory. The store was nearly empty. He stood across from me at the register. "You think this is going to end the way you want?" he asked, voice low. I didn't flinch. "It's already ending." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really want to do this publicly? You think they'll believe you over me, over Mom?" I stepped around the counter. "They don't need to believe me. They just need the facts, and I have them." His mouth curled into a sneer. "You're pathetic. You've always been jealous of me." That's when it clicked. He really believed that. In his twisted mind, I wasn't reclaiming what was mine. I was trying to steal something from him. I leaned in closer. "You're not me, Damon. No matter how many lines you steal, no matter how many lies you tell, you can't carry the weight of the life you took. It was never meant for you." His hands clenched into fists. For a second I thought he'd swing, but he didn't. He just turned and walked out, and I knew I felt that things were about to collapse. Tuesday came. I arrived at Colburn with my folder of originals, ID, essays, the real recommendation letters, even the journal entries I had written during my application prep, dated and time-stamped. They brought me into a quiet conference room, 3 administrators, 1 recorder on the table, no Damon. They asked me to walk them through everything, from the deleted files to the forged account to the letter my teacher had confirmed. I did, carefully, clearly, without embellishment. When I was done, they sat in silence for a moment. Then one of them asked, "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I paused, because I didn't want to believe someone I loved could do this to me. I thought maybe it would pass, that I'd find another path, but the truth is, I deserve this life, and I refuse to be erased. They nodded, and then they handed me a consent form for the DNA test. I signed it on the spot. Afterward, I walked out into the sunlight. I don't know what I expected to feel: vindication maybe, relief, but mostly I felt empty. Exhausted. This wasn't over yet. It could still go either way. But for once I had a voice. I wasn't a ghost anymore. That night I got another text from Damon. "Damon, you just ruined everything." And I stared at it for a long time before replying. "No, you did." A week passed, then 2. No word from Colburn, no more texts from Damon. Just silence. But it was a charged silence like the hush before a thunderstorm. I could feel the weight of it in my chest. Every morning I checked my inbox, half expecting the sky to split open. And finally it did. On a dull gray Thursday I got a call. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Lucas Grayson." "Yes, this is Colburn's Office of Student Conduct. We need to meet with you again. The findings are in." I didn't ask what findings. I already knew. They scheduled the meeting for the next morning. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying everything, every detail I'd submitted, every mistake Damon might have made. I kept seeing his face, my face, reflected back at me like a distorted mirror. When I arrived on campus, the same 3 administrators were there, but this time their expressions were colder, more formal. "We've concluded our internal review," the lead official said, "and we have confirmed that Mr. Damon Grayson fraudulently assumed your identity to gain admission to Colburn University." There it was, like a gavel dropped. The words echoed in my head, "fraudulently assumed your identity." They continued outlining the charges against Damon: academic dishonesty, impersonation, misuse of official documents. He would be expelled immediately, his credits revoked, any scholarships terminated. They asked if I wanted to press formal charges. I hesitated, not because I didn't want justice, but because somewhere in me, he was still my brother, and some wounds are too old to cleanly cut. "I need time to decide," I said. They nodded, understood, then they paused. "There's one more thing," the woman added. "We'd like to offer you a place here, Lucas. We believe you've more than earned it, and we'd like to extend the original scholarship to you if you're willing to join us mid-semester." I didn't know what to say. It felt surreal, like the dream had returned, but this time with a price. "Can I have a few days to think?" I asked. "Of course, but know that your place here is real, not stolen, not borrowed, yours." I left campus that day with a storm of emotions in my chest: relief, gratitude, rage, grief. It felt like I'd won a war but lost a brother, because when I got home, the house was empty. Damon was gone. He'd packed his things, cleared out his room, and left behind a single envelope on my bed. Inside was a short letter. "You always were the better one. I just couldn't live with being second, so I tried to take first. I guess now you'll get what you deserve." Maybe I did too. D. No apology, no address, no way to reach him. Just that. I sat there for hours reading it over and over, trying to decide whether I hated him or pitied him. In the end, I realized it didn't matter, because now the life ahead of me wasn't one I had to steal back. It was mine to build. The first time I walked into a Colburn lecture hall as me, the real me, I couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, from disbelief. The same seats I used to dream about, the same walls I once stared at through a computer screen, watching old guest lectures on YouTube. Now I was here with my name on the roll sheet, professors greeting me, classmates unaware of the war it took just to sit among them. No one knew what had happened. No one knew that a student had been expelled for stealing a life, that the name Lucas Grayson had once been a lie here. Now it was the truth. I wanted to tell someone. I wanted to shout it, but instead I sat quietly, took notes, and listened as Professor Ashby opened the seminar with a quote. "You are not who people say you are. You are who you prove yourself to be." I don't know if she said it for me, but it hit like a stone in my chest. After class, I approached her. I expected confusion or questions. Instead, she smiled. "Lucas, I'm glad you're here." There was a pause. "You look more yourself this time." I blinked. "You knew." I suspected. Something always felt off with him, but students perform in so many ways these days. Then she looked me in the eye. "I read your file. The real one. Your essay was beautiful and raw. I'm sorry you had to go through all that, but I'm glad the right voice is finally here." I nodded, my throat tight. That afternoon, I found a quiet spot in the library, ironically the same corner I had seen Damon post on Instagram months ago. His shadow lingered everywhere, in the walkways, in the dorms, in the professors' memories. But he was gone now, and I had choices to make. The university's legal team reached out again. They wanted to know whether I would pursue formal charges, identity theft, fraud, even emotional damages. It was all on the table. I spoke to a counselor, one the school provided as part of their restitution. She was kind, gentle, asked me questions no one else had bothered to. "What would justice feel like for you?" I sat with that for a long time. I didn't want to see Damon in jail, but I didn't want this swept away either. So I decided to do something else. I wrote a letter, not to Damon, but to the student body, an anonymous piece published in the campus literary magazine. I told the story not with names, but with truth, about a stolen identity, about losing yourself, about taking it back. It ended with this line: "He took my face, my voice, my future, but I kept something he never could, my spine." The article spread, quietly, curiously. Some students whispered about who it was. Most never guessed, but a few, they looked at me differently after that. Not with pity, with recognition, because everyone in some way knows what it feels like to be unseen, what it feels like to be replaced. A month passed, then two. I began to settle in, make friends, build a rhythm. But there were nights I'd still wake up thinking of him, of Damon, of the boy who was my mirror, and my mistake. One night, I got a message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo, a city skyline, rain, and a street musician playing saxophone on a corner. No name, no context, but I knew it was from him. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it, because I wasn't going back. Not to who I was, not to what we were. I had a new identity now, not borrowed, not stolen. Mind. Life didn't snap back like a rubber band. It unraveled slowly in strands of silence, long walks across campus, and moments where I'd forget just for a second that my name had once been someone else's costume. There was no public announcement, no bulletin post that declared Damon had been expelled for impersonating me. Colburn, like most institutions, preferred to handle things quietly, efficiently. The lie had been removed, but its echo lingered, and that echo lived in whispers, in double takes from faculty, in moments when my name was spoken with just the slightest pause, like someone was trying to match my face with old memory. I became good at smiling through it, but beneath that calm surface I was rebuilding, brick by brick. I got accepted into a student writing collective, the one I dreamed about, long before Damon intercepted my future. My submission in a story about duality, about shadows, was met with praise. No one asked if it was autobiographical, but the ones who really read it knew. There's a strange freedom in finally being seen. I thought I had moved on, but grief has a rhythm of its own, and betrayal leaves a phantom pain you don't even realize you're carrying until it's triggered. That trigger came one ordinary afternoon. I was sitting in a cafe off campus grading peer critiques for a literature workshop when I felt a presence behind me, familiar. I turned slowly. Damon, my brother, my twin, the thief who stole my life and wore it with ease until it unraveled beneath him. He looked thinner, pale, unshaven. A gray hoodie swallowed his frame. His shoes were scuffed. There was no glint of confidence in his eyes, just exhaustion. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He didn't ask if he could sit. He just stood there like a statue in the middle of a story I'd already moved past. "You got everything you wanted," he said. I closed my notebook carefully. My fingers were steady. My heart wasn't. "I got what was mine," I replied. Damon's mouth twitched into something halfway between a smile and a grimace. "You think you won, huh?" I didn't answer, because what was there to say? Winning implied a competition, and I had never entered one. I just defended what was already mine. But I could see something breaking behind his eyes, something he couldn't put words to. Maybe shame. Maybe the realization that without me as a blueprint, he had nothing to mirror anymore. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "I don't know who I am without you." It hit me harder than any lie he'd told, because for the first time in our lives, he wasn't pretending. "I spent years trying to be better than you," he said, voice low. "But the truth is, I was just trying to be you." It was easier than admitting I didn't know who I was. I could feel people in the cafe glancing at us. Two young men identical, but not having an intense, quiet moment in public. I leaned in. "You had a choice," I said. "You always had a choice. You didn't have to steal my name. You didn't have to lie to Mom. You didn't have to rewrite my future just because you didn't know what to do with yours." He nodded slowly, jaw clenched. "I know." The silence stretched between us again, thicker this time. He looked down at his feet, then back at me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he added. "I just wanted to say it." I stood up, notebook in hand, and stepped closer until we were face to face. It was like looking into a mirror haunted by a different life. "You said you didn't know who you were without me," I said, "then figure it out. But do it without wearing my skin." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked away. No dramatic goodbye, no tears, just footsteps fading. I watched him go. A part of me wanted to call out, to stop him, to say it doesn't have to end like this. But it did, because this wasn't a story about reunion. This was a story about reclamation, and I had reclaimed enough. That night, I returned to my dorm, sat at my desk, and opened a blank document. I didn't write about Damon. I didn't write about the theft or Colburn or even myself. I wrote about silence, the kind that lingers in the space between people, the kind that fills a room even when it's loud, the kind that you carry when you've been replaced and then remembered. It wasn't an essay, it was a short story. And for the first time since this all began, it had nothing to do with him. It was entirely mine. It's strange how victory doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like quiet, like exhaustion, like standing in a house after the fire is out, surrounded by ashes and the smell of smoke. Damon was gone, expelled, exposed. The truth was no longer something I carried alone, buried in files and sleepless nights. Colburn had restored my place, my name, my scholarship. I walked the campus now without fear of being mistaken for someone else. But freedom came with something else, a hollowness I hadn't anticipated. There were no trophies for surviving betrayal, no awards for outlasting the person who tried to replace you. And even though I had reclaimed everything that was mine, I couldn't stop thinking about what it cost to get here. One morning, I woke to find a package at the dorm's front desk. No return address, just Lucas written in tight, careful handwriting. The moment I picked it up, I knew who it was from. Damon. Back in my room, I opened it with slow, deliberate hands. Inside was a short letter, a USB drive, and a photograph. The photo was old, faded. Me and Damon, age 9, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the community center's spelling bee banner. I had won first place, Damon nothing, but we were both smiling, gap-toothed and sweaty, flush with childhood innocence. On the back of the photo, a single sentence was scribbled in blue ink. This is when it started for me, the first time I felt like I wasn't enough. The sentence hit me harder than I expected because I remembered that day. I remembered how I had studied for weeks while Damon played video games and brushed it off. I remembered how Dad clapped for me with a rare flicker of pride and how Damon sulked in the car. I had thought it was just sibling rivalry. I hadn't known it was the beginning of something darker, a quiet resentment that would one day lead him to steal not just a trophy, but my entire identity. I unfolded the letter next. This isn't an apology. I'm not there yet, but I owe you something. On this drive is everything: the fake emails, logins, screenshots, copies of the documents I used, the messages with Mom, the essay drafts. I kept it all just in case I ever had to run. I don't want to run anymore. Do what you want with it. D. It was short, understated, but heavy. I stared at the drive in my hand for a long time before I plugged it in. What I found didn't surprise me, at least not completely. There were folders organized by month labeled with initials, one for application forms, one for email threads, another for recorded voice memos where Damon had practiced pretending to be me. I opened one called Colburn Interview Prep, Take 4. His voice played through my laptop speakers. Colburn has always felt like home. Even before I applied, I studied their lectures online, especially the department's work on comparative literature. When my father left, I stopped the recording. That was my story. He had practiced my pain until he could recite it with fake conviction. It should have made me angry, furious. Instead, I felt sad, because listening to it made something clear. Damon hadn't stolen my identity out of malice. Not entirely. He did it because he had no idea how to shape his own. He had always followed me, copied me, mirrored me. Even his deception was just another echo of who I was. And Mom had helped him. That thought made my hands shake. I opened the folder labeled emails. Mom. There they were, long threads, conversations about deadlines, instructions, technical walkthroughs. Make sure you delete Lucas's saved transcript from the portal. He'll think he forgot to submit it. Use the essay draft he wrote last week, but cut the part about his nightmares. That's too personal. No, he hasn't seen the Colburn email. I logged into his inbox and deleted it already. Each line was a blade. She hadn't just looked away. She had participated, willingly, thoroughly. She hadn't just betrayed me as a mother. She had conspired against me. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling like the floor was slowly giving way beneath me. There had always been favoritism, yes. I had learned to live with that. Damon got the praise, I got the expectations. Damon got forgiveness, I got responsibility. But I had told myself it wasn't intentional, just a pattern, just a mother trying to balance two sons. But this was deliberate. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just went numb. That evening, I called her. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was hesitant, weak. Lucas, I got your emails, I said. Dead silence. Damon sent me everything. She tried. I didn't know what else to do. He was spiraling. He was so desperate. I thought you thought I could survive it. I finished for her. You thought I was strong enough to lose everything and be okay. She didn't deny it. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know that's not enough. You're right. I said, "It's not." She began crying. I listened. I didn't comfort her. "I still love you," she said through the tears. "You're still my son." "You say that now," I replied. "But when you had to choose between us, you chose him. You didn't just abandon me. You erased me." "I was afraid," she whispered. "So was I. But I didn't destroy anyone to protect myself." There was nothing more to say after that. I ended the call, not in anger, in closure. I left the house behind me that night, not physically, but emotionally. I closed the door on it, the place that raised me, the mother who should have protected me, the brother who wore my skin. I started walking, just me under the streetlights through the quiet side of campus. Eventually, I found myself at the back of the literature building, leaning against the cold brick wall, watching as lights flickered in the upper windows. I had fought so hard to be here, to have this life, this name, and now it was truly mine. A few days later, I got a call from Professor Ashby. She had read my latest short story, the one I submitted to the department's annual anthology. "I have something for you," she said. When I met her in her office, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a nomination form for the Bradford Emerging Writer Award, full scholarship to graduate school, publication, national recognition. "Your story was brutal," she said, "but brave, and more importantly, honest." I sat there stunned. For years I had written to prove I belonged. Now I was writing because I knew I did. Later that night, I stood in front of my dorm mirror, holding the photo Damon had sent me. That day, when we were 9, when he lost and I won, it all began there, but it wouldn't end there, because I was done living in reflection, done being mirrored. From here on out, my story would be mine alone. The next morning, I woke to sunlight, cutting through the blinds, and something I hadn't felt in months: calm. Not peace exactly, but a stillness. The war was over, and though I hadn't escaped unscarred, I had emerged with something intact to my voice. I spent the rest of the week preparing my nomination packet for the Bradford Emerging Writer Award. Professor Ashby offered to review my draft personally, and when she handed it back, her comments were sharp but respectful. "Cut the second paragraph," she said. "You don't need to explain your pain. You already translated it into power." I nodded, letting her words settle in my chest. It was the kind of mentorship I had longed for, constructive, clear, and free of judgment. At night, I wrote with a kind of hunger I hadn't known since before the betrayal. I stopped writing about Damon, stopped writing about identity theft. I started writing about identity, period. Who we are when no one's watching. What it means to build yourself from the ground up when the foundation's been stolen. And for the first time, the words weren't for revenge. They were for me. One evening, I returned to my dorm to find a small letter waiting in my mailbox. No return address. I knew it was him before I even touched the envelope. Damon. I opened it with a little less dread this time. "I'm in Denver, working at a car wash. It's nothing fancy. I'm using my real name again, Damon Grayson. I found an apartment. It's not much, but it's mine. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. I read your story in the campus journal. The boy who disappeared twice. You didn't name me. You could have, but you didn't. You're better than me. D." That last sentence stuck to the inside of my ribs, not because I wanted to be better, but because it was the first time he said it without resentment. No sarcasm, no bite, just truth. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer with the others. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was an ending, or maybe the beginning of something neither of us knew how to define yet. The next few weeks passed in a kind of blur. I submitted my Bradford materials. I got a part-time position assisting with the school's literary magazine. I was invited to speak at a panel about authenticity in creative writing. Me, someone who had been invisible in his own story for years, now being asked how to tell the truth. And yet, I never forgot where I came from. One Friday, Miss Carraway called me from the bookstore. "I still have your nameplate behind the counter," she said. "Want it back?" I smiled. "Only if it still smells like old paper and dust." I visited her the next weekend. The store was the same. Stacks of worn books, the soft ding of the front bell, the faint trace of classical music floating through the air. She handed me the nameplate and gave me a long look. "You're not carrying it anymore," she said. "Carrying what?" The weight, she said. The ache. "You finally put it down." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. We drank tea in the back room and talked about poetry. She never asked about Damon, never asked about the details. She just let me exist whole and unabridged. Later that night, I walked through town alone, and I thought about all the versions of myself that had existed over the last year. The boy who studied for years just to have his dreams stolen, the one who stayed silent, the one who gathered evidence in the shadows, the one who stood in a lecture hall watching his twin pretend to be him, the one who finally said, "Enough." All of them were still part of me, but they no longer defined me. That weekend, I sat down and wrote a new piece. Not a story, not fiction, a letter, to no one in particular. It was called Inheritance. In it, I wrote I didn't inherit his cruelty. I didn't inherit her silence. What I inherited was the part of myself that kept going even when I was erased. My name isn't just something I got back. It's something I built from scratch. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a tearjerker, but it was mine. A few days later, I received a message from Professor Ashby. She wanted to meet. Her office was warm, full of books stacked sideways and tea mugs on every flat surface. I got a call from the Bradford committee, she said. I felt my pulse quicken. They've shortlisted you. You're in the final 3. I didn't know what to say. She smiled. I've been doing this for 20 years, Lucas, and I've never seen someone come through a storm like the one you weathered and still write with grace. Thank you, I said, barely holding it together. She leaned back. You know, there are writers who fight for their story, and there are writers who are the story. You're both. When I left her office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. The next morning, I got an email from the award committee, a formal interview, scheduled for the following week. I closed my laptop and stared out the window. For so long, I had wanted the world to hear me, and now it was listening. But strangely, I wasn't writing for them anymore. Not for the judges, not for the audience. I was writing for the boy I used to be, the one who watched his brother wear his life like a mask, the one who sat outside a lecture hall heartbroken but fist full of evidence, the one who decided that silence was no longer strength. That boy didn't disappear. He evolved, and now he had a voice, one he wasn't afraid to use. The day of the Bradford interview came with gray skies and a soft drizzle. It felt poetic, like the world had turned down the volume so I could finally hear myself think. I dressed simply, no tie, no flash. Just a clean shirt, the same notebook I'd been scribbling into since orientation, and a deep breath. I wasn't there to perform, I was there to tell the truth. The interview panel sat in a semicircle, a professor from another university, a published novelist, and a former award recipient, who now taught full-time. Their questions weren't easy, but they were honest. What drives your writing? Why now? How do you separate pain from craft? I told them what I knew, that writing was the only place where my identity hadn't been manipulated, that it saved me when the rest of my life felt stolen, that I didn't write to expose, I wrote to reclaim. When it was over, they thanked me, and I walked out into the rain without checking my phone or running through my answers, because no matter what happened next, I'd spoken with my own voice. For the first time in a long time, that was enough. Later that week, I received the official results. I didn't win, I was the runner-up, and I was okay with that. Really, truly okay, because for once I wasn't measuring myself against anyone, not Damon, not the award winner, not the version of me that once thought success meant revenge. I framed the letter and hung it above my desk. Finalist Lucas Grayson, Colburn University. That name used to feel like something borrowed. Now it felt earned. I kept writing. That summer, I published 2 essays in small journals. One of them, Inheritance. The letter I wrote on a quiet night after walking past my childhood bookstore was picked up by a national site. It went modestly viral. People started emailing me. Strangers, siblings, quiet boys from loud families, women who said their own voices had been hijacked, people who felt erased just like I once had. They thanked me. They said, "You told my story." And every time I read those words, I thought about Damon, where he was, what he was doing, whether he was telling the truth now or still living someone else's version of it. I never replied to his last letter. I never wrote another. But one day, a small package arrived with a Denver postmark, inside a used copy of East of Eden. The inside cover was inscribed in Damon's handwriting. For the first time, I read something and didn't want to become the author. I just wanted to understand them. I sat with that book in my hands for a long time. He was trying. I didn't know if he'd ever be okay. But for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for the outcome. He had to write his own story now, And I had mine. Months passed, seasons changed, I graduated. My parents came to the ceremony, though they sat quietly in the back, unsure if they were welcome. My mother handed me a single envelope afterward, her eyes red, her hands shaking. I didn't open it right away. I hugged them both briefly, politely, distantly. Some fractures never fully heal. That night back in my apartment, I opened the envelope. Inside a letter and a photograph. The letter read, "You were right. I didn't see you. I saw what I expected, what I needed. I didn't realize how much damage that did until it was too late. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just hoping for space to grow. You taught me something, Lucas. That strength doesn't come from being the loudest. It comes from being unshakably yourself. Mom." The photograph was of me, age 5, standing alone in the front yard, holding a notebook, a pen behind my ear, looking up at the sky. It was the first time I remembered being me, unfiltered, undisturbed, free. I placed it on my desk next to my framed finalist letter, and that night I began a new story. Not a memoir, not a confession. Fiction. A world built from imagination, not memory. Characters that weren't reflections of me, but creations of me. Because I wasn't writing from pain anymore. I was writing from power. The final lines I typed were these: he had always believed his life began in someone else's shadow. But then he realized even shadows can't exist without light. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if someone ever took your story and twisted it to fit their needs, let this be proof you can take it back. You can rebuild from the ground up. You don't need permission. You don't need applause. You just need truth. Your truth. This was mine. And now, it's yours too. Thanks for listening. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been replaced, betrayed, or erased? Tell us your story. Don't forget to subscribe to Ethan's Way for more powerful, true-to-the-bone stories like this one.